topic around Omni-Channel. My name is Lee Becker, and I'm the industry chair for our COI here. And I see that we have our vice chair for industry, Amanda Chavez, is here as well. Also, we have Martha Doris, who's our government advisory chair for our advisor for our COI, and also one of the founder for our COI. So we're grateful that she's here. Thank you for ACT-IAC again for enabling us to have this forum for us to bring government industry together to help us improve the overall experience and service delivery of our government agencies for all. So again, my name is Lee Becker, and just really thankful for all of you to come. We have the recording started, so I know a lot of folks have said, they haven't been able to join, so you have the recording to be able to listen to. And it's just my pleasure to hand it off to Miss Janet Taylor, who is a director at Microsoft and also a member of the program chair that Dominic Sale runs. And Janet, over to you to introduce this amazing panel for this topic. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lee, and welcome all to this July event. The topic for today is Omni-Channel, the customer service strategy that's aims to provide a seamless and consistent experience across all the channels, whether you're talking about phone, email, chat, social media, and self-service. You know, for those of us who've been in the industry, we've been talking about Omni-Channel and the benefits for years, but like most technologies that have an inflection point, it does pose a lot of challenges, such as integrating with all the different systems that are out there, training your agents, and being able to measure performance. So I'm so happy to have three really great panelists and who volunteered their time to talk about their experiences today. And so I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Alan Burnstine, who's the Director of Technology and Innovation at Amtrak. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you.
Sylvie Williams, who's the Transformation Officer for Customer Experience at the Office of Unemployment and Insurance Modernization at the Department of Labor. And then David Lunsford, who comes to us from the Customer Experience Strategist at the Taxpayer Experience Office at the IRS. So, you know, thank you all again, and particularly to Sylvie, who just had arm surgery. So we're really glad to have you. So, you know, starting with Alan, and I'd like to ask each of you to briefly describe Omni-Channel and what it means to both your organization and the customers that you serve. And I'll kick it off with Alan, if you could start.
So I guess we describe Omni-Channel very similar to what you did, the ability to move a customer from one channel to another without losing their information. So we have a lot of customers who start their conversation with us either by text or on the web. And in today's world, it's very hard to transition that to a phone call. And alternately, we have a lot of customers who call us into our contact center, and there are some challenges in understanding, particularly in the VRU, with things like email addresses and reservation numbers that we collect, and the ability to mix channels while you're talking to someone, being able to have them text you or join the conversation via the web, we see as very powerful in simplifying those transactions.
Sylvie, how about you in the Department of Labor?
Thanks, Janet. So for Department of Labor, it's a department with 26 agencies. So I work in unemployment insurance, which is under one of those agencies. So I'll just speak for unemployment insurance. Omni-channel, multi-channel for unemployment insurance, the way we describe it is that we want the information available for our claimants across all channels. And that's information for them during their information gathering, because our claimants come to us from Google mostly. So somebody loses their job and they Google, where do I go for unemployment insurance, while they're applying. Once they apply and they start receiving unemployment insurance, they have to certify weekly or biweekly, depending on their state's requirements. And then if they're denied, during their appeals process. So for us, it's important that through all of that different processes, they be able to get that information across whatever channel they prefer or are able to access. And we'll talk to that later.
Okay, thanks, Sylvie. David, you're up.
Yeah, So I think that a lot of what's been said really describes omni-channel. You know, for us, it's giving taxpayers the opportunity to reach us however they want on the front end, and having our representatives be able to pull that information and coordinate effectively on the back end. So that a lot of what Sylvie's saying applies here too, right? There's a lot of different things, right? You might be applying or filing your taxes. You might be trying to resolve an issue. You might be looking for your refund, regardless of what your goal is with us, to make sure that you're able to ask for that information, provide that information in the channel that you choose, and that on the back end we can effectively triage that communication to move you along quickly and correctly in the process.
Thanks, David. So I'd like to, taking and building upon that, all of you've talked a little bit about how you're currently looking and using omni-channel in your contact centers. What were your goals and objectives in incorporating omni-channel, or looking to incorporate omni-channel? And if you could talk about maybe some of your successes and your challenges, and maybe how you might have addressed some of these challenges. So this time I'm going to start with Sylvie.
Sure. Start with the most challenging one. So I'm I'm going to talk about what the ideal would be, and the reason for that being unemployment insurance is we have 53 states and territories. No two are the same. So if you were to try and map unemployment insurance across, which we have tried and we have done it, there's a spreadsheet somewhere. Every state is different. Every state has its own rules. Every state has its own application. And so when I started last year, I started in the middle of a project that had already started to look across states and to suggest some CX principles for better applications. A few years before I started, it was called, it was either standard application or one application to bind them all, and that wasn't going to work. So one of our challenges is, how do we implement better CX across multi-channels when there are no similarities across states? So the ideal then becomes that however the states do it, what we want to implement are principles such as no information lost when our claimants switch channels. So what we're seeing when we look at analytics is they start their journey online using their mobile devices. So most of folks will go online on their phone to search up unemployment insurance. How do I get something now that I've lost my job? But then they switch that when they go to apply. They'll move to a desktop. And that's because it's hard to apply using your phone. And so that's one thing we're working with states to improve, is to make their applications mobile friendly. But then they'll call in because they've failed somewhere. But we're finding that as they're switching channels, they're losing the work that they've already done. So that's a challenge and a goal, right? So we're trying to work with states, and working with states means we're giving them IT modernization funding, and with that, encouraging them to make some of those changes and make those backends work so that loss doesn't happen. And then the agents who are answering those phones at the contact centers, or agents in offices where people are walking in, have that same information. Because it's not that the agents don't have the information, it's that the technology is so outdated that it's not connected in the back end. So two of those, for us, it's more goals. We don't have that in place. And so our challenges and goals are kind of connected, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you, Sylvie. David, I'm going to turn it over to you. What were some of your successes and challenges as you look to move to more omni-channel?
Sure. So, in terms of successes, I think you can look at the call centers in terms of their adding new channels and technology to sort of allow people to not just call in, but receive automated services when they call in, and also communicate with other channels, like there's chat, there's secure messaging, right? So depending on the use case, because there's a ton of them, right? People need to interact with us. We think of filing taxes and getting refunds, but there's a lot of reasons that people need to interact with us. And so providing the proper channels and providing the proper channel for each use case, or the proper selection of channels, is a challenge. But the call center work has obviously has gone really well. And so that I would say is a success. The introduction of new channels has been a success. One of the challenges, as we've been talking about, is pulling all this together on the back end, because there's the taxpayer information, there's what they've told us in the communications, there's what they may have uploaded digitally or faxed to us or mailed to us or told us on a phone call, or what they've sent to us through a secure messenger or chat. And then there's all their back-end information, and bringing all of that together, using all these disparate systems, some of which are in the process of modernization, right? Like they're being brought up to speed, but we have all the information, but we're not at the point yet where we can bring it all into sort of a unified dashboard where we can understand this is why the taxpayer is reaching out to us. This is what they need. This is how we can best resolve it. We can figure it out, and we are getting there, but that's the ideal state, right? That's the goal, is to understand when they come in, why they came in, and how we can help.
Great. Thanks, David. Ellen, I'm going to wrap this part of the discussion up with you.
Sure.
So where have you seen success, and what's been your biggest challenge in getting there?
Yeah, so we've been sending out text messages to customers and emails and robocalls for emails for 14 years, and text messages, I think, about 6 years. And what we didn't have was a good way to interact with the customer if they responded to that. Right? If we call them, they can press 0, get immediately to an agent. But actually getting to someone and knowing what we had contacted them about was a huge challenge for us. We also didn't realize that people were just trying to text us. We had our aggregator pull a report of all of the incoming text messages, and only 20% were responses to things we sent. The rest were just unsolicited, seeing if we were there. So we very quickly spun up a text chat channel, and that was 4 years ago. And 2 years ago, we added web chat to that, and it has been an incredible success. It is our fastest growing channel. It's probably by middle of next year, it's going to overtake phone calls as our leading method of customers reaching us. Challenges have been that tying that all into the back end data. And I think I mentioned in the introduction that in our voice channels, there are things that are hard for agents, or more particularly for our VRU, to understand that we need to have if we're going to completely service the customer. And what we're looking at moving into is the ability to combine these channels to support that. We're kind of baby steps there. We've got a big project underway, but yeah, that ability to tie in all of that data together. So I think I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but for instance, if someone responds to a text message, we know their history. We know the messages that we sent them when that gets to an agent. And we do have a small virtual assistant that can predict some of what they're calling about or texting about. If they do an unsolicited text to us, the best we have right now is looking up their phone number and seeing if they're an existing customer. But we don't even have a screen pop for that. It's the agent has to copy and paste it into the customer profile system and determine if we have a profile, if they've got travel coming up. By that time, the customer's already told us all those things. So that predictive ability has been a huge challenge for us to overcome.
Great. Thanks, Alan. It seems like the theme here is that bringing it all together on the back end for a cohesive, look into what the customer's going on. If I kind of summarize that correctly?
I think so, yeah.
For you. So, and I don't know if this is a good time to bring it up, but in the prep sessions that we had here, one of the things that I think Alan brought it up, and that I think is across the board, is you have a lot of customers and citizens out there who may not have access to certain forms of technology. And for example, Alan, you brought up the great example of the Amish community, and they use your trains, the Amtrak system, quite a bit, but they don't have a lot of the techniques and technology that we're looking to address here.
Yeah, they don't have credit cards. They
Yeah.
don't have smartphones. They don't have computers. Yeah, so there is a travel agent in Pennsylvania that many of them use, and they put it on their credit card, and if people pay cash. But they will call us and make a reservation and then pay cash at the station. And being able to tie that information together, knowing that they're coming to pick up their ticket and paying cash, and being prepared for that is one of those things that we consider an omni-channel.
Yeah.
We're starting in one channel, finishing in another.
And it's still pretty old school, but it's still, there are those populations out there.
Well, Janet, just real quick, you call it old school. I was thinking about that, but it's important because we just had the digital experience come out of the president's office, and everyone then says, well, let's put everything online, right? And it is, let's put stuff online and because everyone's online, right? That's the idea. But I know from my old agency, unnamed old agency, that the tendency then becomes take forms as they exist and put them online, right? So that's one wrong way of doing things. The other way is then put stuff online and forget about the paper. But especially in unemployment insurance, what we've seen now is we have claimants who don't have access to good internet, but identity verification is the very first step for them to get any unemployment insurance benefits. And we have folks falling out of that because they can't upload their license. And after their third try, they're getting marked as fraudulent. So then they can't even try through that channel. So now they're getting kicked out of that channel. So what US Department of Labor did, we're partnering with USPS. So we're partnering with USPS to provide an in-person channel method of proofing when somebody falls out of the digital channel. And I was joking about this, not to digress, but I just flew to London and I had to upload photos of our passports. Now my passport is from the 1900s, as my teenager says, but his is from this century, so it has new security features. And as I'm like old school UX and I'm always fighting security to make things more usable, his passport photo page and the page above it has his passport number diagonally all over the two pages, including his photo. And what that means is when I went to take a photo of his passport to upload it, I could not get a good photo and it kept getting rejected. And that was just for travel, right? And I had a month to do it. But imagine somebody who loses a job and they got to do this within a week or 2 weeks and they're unable to do it. And then they get marked fraudulent. And online is the only way they can do it. And let me tell you, there's one state, and I won't name them because I can't remember them, that do not have a paper application right now for unemployment insurance. So, then we're doing disservice to our citizens when we just take a channel away when we talk about omni-channel service.
Yeah.
To add on to that, when we talk about this, we're always saying like digital first isn't digital only, because we know we have those populations, right? We still know there is a tremendous, and same for us, right? There's a large percentage of the population who uses the tax assistance centers, right? Who want to go in person. Well, how do they schedule an appointment to go in person, right? So the services have to be available, and you have to have ways of scheduling those services that make them available, that don't rely on digital channels, for example. So we put a lot of focus on things like the data integration on the back end, so we get this 360 view of what our customer wants from us, and we can best serve them. But we have to be mindful of the fact that a lot of those legacy channels are still important and will remain important going forward.
Great, thank you. Have you guys, well, I'm sure you have, what are the risks and barriers that you've encountered along this journey? And I think, David, it's time for you to start this.
Sure. So in terms of risks and barriers, I think, so we talked about legacy technology as a barrier. I think in terms of risk, we have the two I would call out are privacy and security. One of the things, especially, so let's talk about digital, especially as we try to make more things self-service, so that you don't need to call, you don't need to come in, right? You can handle it in an automated fashion. You don't need to talk to a person. You can handle it in an automated fashion. We focus on security, right? So, okay, if we make it available digitally, then technically it's going to be available at scale, right? And so then we try to understand, like, what are the risks of fraud, of security concerns, of data breaches, and that has to be paramount in whatever we offer, because we don't want to offer services that offer services in a way that ultimately hamper the taxpayer, because if someone commits fraud on your behalf, that affects you, right? Like somebody you've never met tries to steal your identity and tries to file taxes, that affects you, right? And so when we offer enhanced services, and we try to offer it through new channels. One of the things we're really mindful of is the security that needs to go in to make sure that those channels are safe for people to use.
So I read somewhere that the contact center is one of the first places that fraud occurs. So anyway, Sylvie, do you have anything you need to say on that?
Sure. So for us in unemployment insurance, one of the biggest barriers is the fact that we are trying to work at a federal level on a benefit that's given out at a state level. So even when we try to encourage states or work with them by giving out IT mod funding that's very specifically aimed at CX improvements, by the time grants are approved or awarded, states are already another year behind, let's say. And so when we're earmarking those funds for, let's say, even IT modernization or digitization, states are saying, well, but we need back-end modernization that we don't have funds for, and you're telling us to improve our systems. So it's, it's like we're telling them to put, I'm going to go back to lipstick on a pig. Right? So, but we're looking at it, we're saying, make this better and improve the customer experience of your application. They're like, but we already put that application on a system that was 20 years old. How do we get funding to improve that? So one of the barriers is just the gap in understanding between the federal and the states. And then when we're talking about the contact centers and combining all the multi-channel information, what we hear from states is just getting somebody onboarded into a contact center, the amount of time it takes to train up somebody is a lot. And then the turnover is high. So both of those combined just lead to another barrier with that. They're focusing more on that, and then the tech adoption takes a back seat. I talked about the security features, those security and privacy, Dave touched on that. I think I had a third point, but it'll come back to me later.
All right. So Alan, what in your journey, what were some of the risks and barriers that you may have encountered?
Well, I'll add to David's comment about security. So as a commercial venture, we take credit cards and have to follow the payment card industry standards and keep those credit cards and information secure. Text, which was our first non-voice channel, is not a secure channel by any means. And we very quickly determined we would not accept credit cards. But that led to a whole second challenge of customers want to make their reservation on text. How are they going to pay? So we had to very quickly come up with some solutions, one of which was in our VRU, we set up a direct to payment channel. So we say, call this number, you can give your credit cards securely over our voice service, which voice is not as secure as we would hope, but it's better than text. Our plan is to also add a web page that they can go to pay for that. And then we had to make a policy change because our agents have never been allowed to call customers unless they got disconnected from a call or it was an escalated case in our customer relations department. So our frontline agents received calls but never called anyone. So we had to change that policy and say, if you've got a customer who you need to get their credit card, you are allowed to call them, validate that you're talking to the right person, make sure that they understand you really are Amtrak, and then accept the credit card that way. So moving that to a more digital channel is great, although again, there's customers that won't work for. The other challenge we've had is in combining different vendors' technologies. So we have a phone system from one vendor, we have our VRU from Microsoft Nuance, we have a web AI from another vendor that is a very rich virtual assistant, but had no way to escalate that to chat. So we had to do what we call a co-opetition because they're both in the same industry, but Nuance, Microsoft, and this other vendor cooperated to allow escalations of those chats from the virtual agent to a real agent. And we've had other similar situations in trying to tie in information between the systems that the customers were communicating with us when it gets to an agent.
Great, thank you guys. So the next topic I kind of had on my agenda here was really optimizing the customer experience. I think we kind of talked about it, but if we look into it a little further, we've talked about consistent coherency across the different channels. Can you talk a little bit about how easy and convenient it is right now for customers to switch between channels? And Alan, I'm going to open it up to you.
Yeah, I don't think we're at a point where it's easy yet. We're definitely working on it. So the project I'm working on now with Nuance is an upgrade to our VRU from a directed dialogue to a natural language application that'll have some predictive capability based on what we know about the customer when they call. And we are doing a lot of tying in our outbound text channel to, and even inbound text to the VRU. So I mentioned before, collecting emails very hard. Collecting a 6-digit alphanumeric reservation number, very hard to get right, very time consuming if we don't hear it right. So allowing a customer to text that information to us while they're still talking to the VRU or an agent, we think it's going to be very powerful, and that's going to be in place early next year. We also have a lot of customers who just ask questions and want answers, and trying to do that with a long answer in an automated system can be challenging to get the customer to listen all the way through it. So we're going to offer them the ability for us to text them a link for more data in those frequently asked questions.
Great. Sylvie, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. The quick answer is no. And some of it was, we discovered it during the Hawaii wildfires. So they had their application online, and suddenly wildfires happen and they're unable to process their applications online. And we, with our partnership with USPS and the in-person identity proofing, we were able to get that partnership going in 2 weeks. And that's been a very successful partnership. That's one of the places that I'm encouraging states to put a survey online, so then we can actually show CSAT and trust scores and show the, the states that are putting that partnership online. And even though that's going from a digital channel to an in-person channel, that actually increases that trust score. Because when they fail in that online channel and we quickly give them the right messaging, the right next step, and that next step works for them, that trust and satisfaction score actually goes up. So that's an example of where it's working, and the few states that we've had the partnerships with, it's working well, and we're trying to get that in more and more states. So when done well, yes, it works well. In other places where we don't have those partnerships, of course, it's not, the channel jumping is not working well.
Oh, I love that, as someone put in the chat, those cross-agency partnerships. David,
just based on what Sylvie was saying, I think that's a really great point, in that, so when we're not always great at the coordination, right? But people don't necessarily mind having to jump channels as long as they know what to do and you make it reasonably easy for them, right? It's a lot about expectation setting. So even if you're not perfect in terms of that transfer and triage of communication and issue resolution, knowing what to do next can be a big touch point where, okay, this didn't work the way I wanted it to, but I know what I need to do next. Just knowing what you need to do next can go a long way towards improving the satisfaction with the experience and ultimately leading to a better outcome.
Great, thanks, David. We've talked a lot about just the overall experience for the citizens, but let's kind of move, if we could, to the agents side of this, because it's an important piece of the call center. And so, David, I'm going to start with, because, at the IRS, you've got a lot of agents. How well are the agents equipped and empowered to handle the multiple channels that come in?
It's something that, so they are, the knowledge of these customer service representatives who are dealing with taxpayers is incredible. The amount of training they go through, their knowledge of tax law is just, it's sort of mind-boggling. So they have the knowledge, right? What we are working on doing, and this is a big in the strategic operating plan for the IRS, which is a gripping read, and I highly urge everyone to get into it. But there's a goal of sort of a 360 dashboard for our assisters, so that they can sort of see everything, right? Because right now they're working in multiple screens, and Alan talked about like cutting and pasting from one program into another program, and there's a lot of that going on, and they could be much more efficient and much more empowered to help taxpayers if they have easy access to the information they need, and you get it all in one place. And that's, it's a primary objective in the strategic operating plan, so I bring it up, but it's critical if you want to move to the next level of providing sort of that service in an omni-channel format, is providing the assisters on the back end everything they need all in one place. Again, so they know why you're coming in, they know what the issue is, they know how to best resolve the issue, because they have the knowledge to do it, as long as we provide them all the underlying information to make those decisions, to provide that guidance or resolution to the taxpayer.
Great. You know, Sylvie, I know because you handle the states, it's more of a federated sort of contact centers. You know, what are your thoughts on this agent experience?
So having spoken to most of the states just about because when we started talking about customer experience with them last year, understandably, they were talking about, well, what about our employees and the employers, because they deal with employers in the unemployment insurance world as well. And what we're seeing is not only the need for them to see that 360 view of what that claimant has already done, if they've done something online, not to have lost all of that by the time they walk into an office or call into a contact center, but also while we improve that employer or claimant interaction online. So if we improve a claimant portal or an employer portal online, that in turn improves the employee experience a little bit, because some of the questions they're getting right now could be solved by making it easier for the claimants and employers to get those answers online. So some of that contact center experience is about just funding that online portals for the claimants and to make that information easier for them to understand. A lot of questions they get is about their claim status, which at my old agency was one of the big things they worked on last year too, because a lot of the questions they would get walk-in traffic and call centers was, where's my claim? Because once they applied, it was like a dark hole that things go into for a lot of public benefits, right? People apply and then they don't hear anything for weeks and they have no way to find out. And if your employees are dealing with 75% of their calls are about what's my status, then they're not working on other things that they could be adjudicating and working on more complex issues. So we're hearing that from a lot of the states too.
So do you see something about like maybe using some sort of facility to have like where people can go online without doing where's my status? And
correct.
Okay.
That's one of the, if you look on USDOL's, like our customer experience principles, claim status or status and wayfinding is what they've called it, is one of the big things that we're encouraging states to do.
Great. All right, Alan, we're going to wind that.
For me, it's not where's my claim, it's where's my train. 25% of our calls are train status requests. And that's the first thing we automated on the text channel, was the ability to get an update on the text that we sent them by just texting back update, or specifically requesting status and giving us the train number and station they're interested in. But yeah, so moving on to agents, yeah, absolutely a single view of everything is very important. And we are replacing our 25-year-old agent reservation system with a new desktop that's going to integrate customer profile information, desktop, and eventually we want to embed the phone and chat channels right in that same interface. So they just have one tool with everything in it, all in the same place. In the meantime, the agents absolutely love the chat channels. It has attracted some of our best agents onto that channel. And they will bid and fight each other to get those jobs, even though the pay is essentially the same. It is so much easier to deal with a customer when you can take that breath and read what they said and not respond immediately, particularly with a customer who's upset about something. That has been a great boon for them. One of our challenges in that is that 25-year-old reservation system can only handle one customer at a time. And the chat agents can easily do 3 or 4 chats simultaneously, particularly on the text channel, which is very asynchronous. That it takes a long time to get a response. So they can be doing other things, and then when that response comes in, go handle that. But if 2 customers are trying to do a reservation at the same time, one of them has to wait. So our new system is going to allow 16 simultaneous reservation. We're never going to use that many, but it's going to allow that capability of 16 simultaneous sessions. I was going somewhere else with that, sorry. I keep focusing though on those single channels rather than the omni-channel part of that. And I think that's kind of because we aren't really, again, sort of at that baby step point of it. The agents haven't really done multi-channel very much. The VRU is doing some, the agents, other than placing a phone call, we're not quite there yet. I think they're going to be very happy with it. Eventually, what I'd like to see is blending. So when the call volume is very high and chat volume maybe not as high, allow them to take some calls, but control the number of calls that any agent gets to allow the chats to continue. Kind of allow them to multitask in multiple channels. I think our agents are quite capable of it. We do have the ability with our chat channel. Every agent can take 2 simultaneously, but they can request additional. So if they're not working on a reservation, they can add it. And I see all day long agents on 3, 4 chats at a time.
Cool. I've been working
I'll
in
just
this.
add real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, that the addition of chat, much like what Alan was saying, the addition of chat, the interest in certain demographics of people who become customer service representatives, the appeal of chat for the employee is extremely high, because some of them, like, that's the way they communicate, right? They don't ever call anybody on the phone themselves. Their de facto means of communication is chat. And so it simply makes sense to them. It's more intuitive, and it provides, I mean, it's great for the employee and it's great for the taxpayer. As Alan's saying, you can handle multiple chats at the same time. And for us, it's the volume is dependent on whether or not it's authenticated, right? If you're discussing somebody's personal information, right? If I've authenticated, I know you're you, and we're talking about your personal tax situation, you can only handle one, right? Because you don't want to accidentally put data in the wrong chat. So there's some restrictions there that limit the potential scalability of it. But for anonymous, if you're asking very basic questions, it's the efficiency it provides, and just the real interest and enjoyment of using the channel has been very high.
Good. Sylvie, did you want to add anything to that, or time to move on?
I think I can name one state that's currently using text and email: California. Let me give a shout out to them.
That's right.
All right. So let's kind of move on to, I've been selling this stuff long enough to know that, you start out looking at goals and objectives and in your journey. And so, my guess is you all have documented when you started this, certain goals and outcomes that you wanted to see. And if we could talk about some of the benefits that you're seeing in terms of maybe metrics for omni-channel adoption for your maybe customers, agents, and throughout the organization. I'll start. Let's just pick Alan.
Sure. Yeah, so contact centers live and die on their metrics. It's average speed of answer, talk time, et cetera. And we knew going in that text was going to be a different animal, that we were going to have to learn some things. We did get some advice from our partner Nuance, which was great. And we took some guesses about how many agents we would need to handle the same volume and what our volume might look like. And we were so far under the mark of how many agents we would need for chat. We started with 20 agents and we are now at 75, and that's not 24/7 yet. It's just grown unbelievably. As far as measuring, yeah, we've got all the standard measuring tools, and what we found is that any individual customer interaction takes about twice as long as a phone call doing the same work. And that's just, it's not that the agents are slower at it, it's waiting for the customer to respond. And there's a lot of downtime, which is why we have them doing 2 chats when possible or more. Overall, we're seeing that any given agent is basically as effective, if not more effective, in chat than a voice channel, because they are doing 2 things at once, and they're very good at that. And they're not going over the same information over and over again. You're not losing things in translation. You've got it in writing. The customer can download a transcript of it. Far less of those chats become repeat customers with asking the same question because they didn't get the answer that they thought they wanted, right? We're giving them the right answer each time, and we've got better tools for that, right? So agents have their knowledge base that in a voice channel, they then need to speak to the customer, and some customers just don't understand what you're trying to say unless you say it in different words. And for the knowledge base, that's very hard to do. You read it, and then if the customer doesn't understand, you try to put it into your own words. And Experienced customer agents are better at that than non-experienced. But with a chat, you're putting the actual content from the knowledge base directly into a chat, and then the customer has the time to go over and read it and understand it better. And same with the customer questions. The agent has that time to look through the question and really understand what it is this customer is asking for, even if they didn't speak it that clearly. So we're finding great efficiency and tremendous first call resolution or first contact resolution in those channels.
That's awesome.
I guess that's it. Yeah.
Sylvie, how about you?
So states are using the first contact resolution is still the big one for our call centers. We're working with them to implement other metrics. Not all states have metrics. Not all states have in-house. Their applications aren't all measured in-house. They have vendors, and not all of them have vendors that report metrics to them. So that's part of my job, is to work with all the states and kind of implement standard metrics. Because as you can imagine, once you start talking to different entities about standard metrics, one of the thoughts is, are you going to start measuring us against each other? So one of my roles till I leave next year is to take some of that fear out and introduce CX metrics as something for them to baseline individually and improve upon, instead of measuring them against each other, and to help them learn from each other.
Sounds great. How about you, David?
I think anytime you have a contact center, first contact resolution is something that's going to be a priority. I mean, so one of the service-wide, or actually federal government-wide, high impact services, there's an OMB circular A11 section 280 that dictates a lot of how we measure this customer experience. And so we have a focus on, is it building trust in government, as well as satisfaction and a lot of other contributing factors. And so that's something that we care about as well when we're doing the measurement, is what is this interaction's impact on things like trust in government. We talked about efficiency, and we can measure the efficiency of different channels, but I think it's also important. We talked about like the experience of different channels, and we'll bring it all together into the multi-channel. But it's interesting to see how the customer experience is changed by the introduction of different multi-channel. Right. So the customer experience, when they are going through the different touch points, right? Maybe they need to submit something. So they go through and they upload it digitally, or maybe they fax it in, or maybe they mail it. And the next part of their journey is, well, maybe it's a phone call. Maybe for more complex tax issues, we piloted secure messaging, or expanding that, so that you can have not just sort of a one-off chat, but an ongoing back and forth with the employee who's handling the case. And so we can look at those interactions along the journey. And we haven't brought it all together, right? But mapping out that whole journey so that we can measure the quality of each touch point along that journey is really important in terms of helping us understand what's working, what needs improvement, where people are sort of maybe running into walls, where they're getting through quickly and they're having a great experience. And so it allows us to get beyond the individual touch points and onto what the entire journey looks like. So those measurements are really important in that respect as well.
Janet, can I follow up on that real quick?
Sure.
So at my old agency, there were silos, right? There were different things that the agency does, and each one of those is an application that has different touch points, like David just mentioned. And so when we started measuring, that was an important thing to do, because when one silo has really low satisfaction and trust scores, the tendency for the owners is to get really defensive. And what we were able to do is then look at the touch points and then pull out where not that they were, where that satisfaction score was lower and where we needed to improve it. And that it wasn't just a low satisfaction score within that application, it was that touch point across all the silos that had a problem, and that we needed to fix that. And so it helps us when you start collecting feedback and have those feedback loops, not just at the end of a journey, but at the touch points at each touch point in that journey, then you can look across those journeys and across those touch points, and it gives you a more complex way of measuring the trust and satisfaction, instead of just having that one end point where you're just saying, well, for us, like at the end of the unemployment insurance application, somebody's dog agrees with me. That's what I'm going to say. yeah, so it gives you ways to then measure and compare and contrast across journeys.
I hate to digress
Yeah,
here
and
with the
one more
dog.
thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, please.
No, I had to laugh about the dog, but when COVID first started out, I had a customer that with one of our first virtual meetings, and he had a parrot, and that parrot had some very salty language that kept interrupting the meeting. It's hilarious. Anyway, David, go ahead.
If I had a salty parrot, I would bring it to every meeting.
It was.
But I think, but one of the things that I think that I forgot to mention is that as we go through those journeys, when you start offering different channels, the expectations change, and the expectations may change in ways that you hadn't planned for. And so the expectation of somebody who mails something to the IRS is different from the expectation of somebody who has just uploaded something digitally. Now when they upload it digitally, they have very strong confidence that you've gotten it, right? So they're not calling about that. But we found they tend to expect a response quicker because they know exactly when you got it. And so the customer expectation, this is a lot about expectation setting, but it's also about, well, this is something that we didn't necessarily factor in, is that the expectations for responses would change based on the channel that the customer chose to submit information through. And so that was a learning opportunity for us.
So I think, does anyone have anything to add to that?
I agree completely. One of our inbound channels is email or really web form that generates an email into our customer relations department. And we only have so many people doing any given job, and most of the time we're 1 to 2 days on a response, but it can get longer after rail events like have happened in the Northeast corridor over the past several weekends. So that expectation is that, we're going to get back to them right away. And that doesn't always happen. We now, lessons learned, right? We are sending an automated message that we've gotten your email and we'll respond, and we're giving some expectation of the response time. But another project that I hope to implement next year is to put some, I won't call it AI, we're kind of staying away from that, but some machine intelligence behind that, and maybe answer some of the common questions from reading the email before an agent gets it. Still have that go to an agent for fact checking and any compensation, but get somebody an answer right away, because that's what they're expecting if they send an email.
Great point. Anything else before we move on? Okay, I mean, I think this is a good point to, you brought up some pain points, and, prior to adopting your omni-channel strategy, where did you see the particular pain points, and was your strategy in moving to omni-channel try to address those gaps in that service process? And David, I'm going to lead it off with you, maybe, because you brought up pain.
So, I think we start with multi-channel, right? We start with offering our customers the way to communicate with us in the way they want to. And then we sort of work towards that omni-channel, right? Knowing that sometimes they're going to want to call, sometimes they're going to submit stuff electronically, sometimes they're still going to fax us stuff because people still want to fax us stuff. And so we start with the multi-channel component and then work towards the omni-channel experience. And so, as we've done the analysis, as we've looked at these journeys, we've said, okay, what's this pain point? How can we resolve this pain point in the context of the broader journey? And a lot of times it's adding a new communication channel or a new way to submit information. And then you're always trying to think ahead to the eventual omni-channel, to that integration. But I think it's both the benefit and the pain of doing this is that you need to offer, here's a pain point. We need to correct this pain point. This is going to have some knock-on effects on everything else that we do. But let's get it out there. Let's see how it works. And let's see how people are using it. And then we try and tie it together into part of a broader experience that works more holistically.
Great. Sylvie?
And sorry, I have yard workers outside, so I'm going to mute and unmute myself. I agree with what David said, and I'm just going to add this, since I work with 53 states and territories. Go talk to the people who are going to use your services. I got to go out and conduct usability research last year with our contractors and actually got to do some usability testing. And, you know, I've got 17 years, I've got colleagues here who've got more time than me. And I was still surprised. You know, we're experts in the work we do. We're not experts in our users, in their journeys and what they're trying to do. So we still need to go out there. We still need to talk to the people who are trying to do this work, who are trying to get these services from us. So we can never get away from that. So whatever we're trying to do, we need to go talk to the humans who are trying to do the work.
Great. Alan, thoughts?
Yeah, so we didn't really bring it, well, yeah, we didn't really bring in the additional channels because of specific pain. We brought it in because we found customers were telling us that that's what they wanted, right? So I brought up the example earlier that customers were texting us not knowing if we were going to answer. And when we started to answer, they were delighted. And that, there's also one of our managers, senior managers in the contact center business side, who was of the opinion that a phone call means you failed somewhere else. Right? You failed on a digital channel, you failed on a personal channel. They're not calling you because they're happy to call you, right? But the difference we found is that customers are very happy to chat with us. They prefer that to self-serving. Right? They want some personal touch. They just don't want to do it on the phone. So that's where we really brought in the web chat component, was because we knew that customers wanted it, and it's proven itself. It really has. It's our fastest growing channel.
And just a question on, is that with a virtual agent or with a live agent chat?
It's
both?
Well, a little of each.
Okay.
We have a virtual agent that we've had for many years, and customers, we looked at our dropout rate, how many customers were getting to the contact us page where they could only call at that point or email. And it was a significant number were dropping out even after they got a correct answer. But so we added web chat, and this is where we came into the two different vendors, right? We added web chat from one vendor, virtual agent from the other. So we now have two ways of getting information on the website. And the web chat is sort of a little bit ahead in the number of contacts than the virtual agent right now. We hope to, and we did add the ability for that virtual agent to escalate, so they don't need to switch channels. They can just stay within that same window and get to an agent. Eventually, we want all of those contacts to start in a virtual agent, but make it very easy to move to a real agent.
Great. You know, we've got about 5 minutes before we really open it up to Q&A. So I was wondering if I could ask you all to maybe kind of summarize this whole discussion. And David, I'm going to pick you to kind of start, just summarize your experience briefly.
So summarize, I think that this is Omni-Channel becoming offering true Omni-Channel service is a journey in itself. You understand, you're trying to understand what your customers want. You're trying to understand how best to give it to them, what they think of how you're offering the channels that you're offering. And it's a journey for the back end as well, right? It's a journey of IT modernization and integration, and a journey of employee education and tool development, so that they are empowered to help along that omni-channel journey.
Great. Sylvie?
I agree with everything David said.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan, you're up.
Yeah, I think following on to that, I think we would all love to be in a greenfield environment where we can start with what our vision is and build it all at once, and none of us are, right? We have probably all started with a call center or walk-up customer service, and we're trying to add these things, and that's where the challenges come in, is how fast can you get from where you are to where you want to be? How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? Where are the pain points and integrations? It can be very challenging, and when you start on this journey, you need to look at what do you want your endpoint to be, and how much are you willing to spend to get there, right? Is the expenditure worth the benefit? I think in Omni-Channel, I think we've shown that it is. Both in customer satisfaction, which is in my opinion, of 30 years in contact centers, I think customer satisfaction should be our top measure of anything. It often isn't. I think we're getting there at Amtrak. But you know, there's a cost to it, right? And you have to consider that as you build out these things.
Thank you. So as I mentioned at the outset, we're going to use the last half hour for question and answer. I think someone posed a question in the chat, but as we go through this, if you have a question, raise your hand and I will unmute you. And I think it was, Lee, did you say Nellie? Someone had a question in the chat and I can't find it.
Yeah, Nellie has a question. I have the question here. Her question, that's Nellie Kinsella, I believe. Are any of our panelists using customer personas and journey maps to help match channels to customer preferences? Would love to hear more about the process to create those and use them. I know I heard a bit from everyone that shared a bit of it, but does anyone want to take that first?
I'll say we've just started on that. A cart before the horse. We started up a new innovation group that brought in a lot of people from outside who've done this kind of work before, and they are building out personas and helping us guide not just channels, but also booking, what we call book my trip, take my trip. There's one other. It just right past me. But yeah, we're building out the customer journey map from a train journey perspective, but also the customer journey map across our various channels from self-service to full service. But we didn't use that to inform the decisions we've made so far. It's being used to inform the future decisions we make.
Thanks, Alan.
As Sylvie or Dave?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. So we have used personas and journey maps in the past. I think there's always opportunities to do more and do it and revise what you've done based on how you're changing the experience, right? Because every time you create a persona, and the personas actually stay the same some of the times. But when you create a journey map, I mean, ultimately what we're trying to do is modify that journey a little bit. And
right.
So when you do that, then you need to go back through that process and understand how what you have done has changed those touch points. And I think the user journeys are, and having the right persona is important. I think the same is true when we do journey maps. I think it's really critical to not just look at the customer's journey. It's important if you can have, for all those touch points, have not just the customer's journey, but everybody else who is touching it, right? So that may be a CSR for us, that's somebody who you call on the phone. It may be another employee who handles like larger, more complicated tax issues. They might all touch it. And so it's really, really important. And our most valuable insights, I would say, have come from those journey maps that are more comprehensive, that have every layer of the journey from everybody involved in that journey.
Yeah, that's a great one, because one of the dangers also, I love that you talked about the action aspect, because one of the dangers can be we can really start admiring the problem and then actually admire it some more, and there's no action at all. So I really love that you're talking about, kind of, and the pieces of, what's on the front stage, the on stage, the backstage. Again, not trying to bring Disney in here, but I think Disney kind of, right, there's a reason why things feel so seamless. It's because they've done a lot of work also on the back end to make sure that things can actually work that way to what's ideal for the customer and the employee. That's wonderful. So it looks like we have another question about
Knowledge management.
Yeah, knowledge management.
So the question came in on knowledge. Any tips on knowledge management? Getting everybody within the organization to play from, as they said in the question, the same set of sheet music in a sprawling organization. Anyone want to take that question?
I can certainly share what we did, because I think
Sure.
It's been a great success. When we first initiated a virtual agent on our webpage, immediately we realized that would be a great tool for our agents as well. So we have the same same Ask Julie virtual agent that's on the web is also on the agent desktops. The data that it looks at is slightly different because it includes policy documents and how much you're allowed to give as credit and things like that that we wouldn't make public. But the engine is the same, and where the questions are the same, the answers are the same. So the customer can find it themselves, or an agent can get it all through a simple ask a question, get an answer kind of interface. We use machine learning in that, not large language model AI, to identify the intents of the question. So the customer can, or the agent can ask that question in many different forms and get to the same article. The articles are all written by our content team. We're not using any kind of automatic generation of that at this time. But the questions are definitely using that language model kind of AI to find those articles, and it's been very, very successful. We've been doing it probably 8-9 years now.
Great. Anyone else?
I'm going to say that's one of the things that's easier for me, maybe because at the state level, it's a smaller team and we have maybe 1 or 2 contact centers and fewer people who are all getting that information from a smaller set. So it's easier for them to have the same set of information. So I don't have that big of a problem in unemployment insurance, but definitely at the last agency, Social Security Administration, same issues that you have at the national level. So making sure that wherever you have the chat system pulling information, that has the right information, that it's updated. I think we had the problem of you want to make sure that it's updated constantly and it doesn't have outdated information, because then whoever's pulling from it is getting outdated information.
Great.
That's a great point. Yeah, because if you want to be consistent in the information that you are offering, right? That consistency, you don't want somebody to get one answer one place and one answer someplace else. And so if you can use the same knowledge management system to inform what your people are saying over the phone, what they're saying in chat, what they're getting in an automated fashion, ideally, I mean, you apply simple language or plain language so that it is comprehensible as possible, right? You want people to understand what you're saying, but then have it be exactly the same. It is a great goal. It's obviously challenging because it's not always the same people, right? And the information isn't always being pulled from the same place. The question might be asked in a different context, and there's a challenge of getting everything on the same page, but it's really critical that you put the time and effort in to do so.
Right. And to follow up, the plain language is important because when it's written in legalese and a contact center person has to explain it to a citizen, they're all going to explain it differently. But if you already have it in plain language, then it's being told to people in the same language, right?
Great. So we got a question in from Nikki French. What department within your organization, my screen bounced up, handles social media, customer inquiries, say like on Facebook, a website, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc.? And is this part of, does this fall under the scope of the contact center? Anyone want to take that?
Okay, we've got 3 different social media groups right now. So our marketing department publishes on Facebook and X, and I think they're doing TikTok now, for advertising kind of information. We have a group in operations that sends out information to passengers either before or they're on the train or on the train about operational issues that might impact them. And that is closely tied to our contact center, but not part of it currently. But it's the same management chain as you move up. So they've got their own center that sits in our operations center rather than our contact center, so they're close to the information. Yeah, so they put things out also, as well as sending texts and app notifications. They also post that on X and Facebook. I guess X is the only channel now. And then we have a group that responds to questions that are direct messaged to them or published publicly on those channels for the major ones, Instagram, Facebook, and X currently. And that is in our contact center. fairly small group right now.
Yeah, you know,
And they tend to, rather than, they'll answer questions, but if a customer needs specific action on their reservation or their profile, they will have that customer contact us through another channel rather than trying to transfer that.
yeah, so Alan, like this weekend, I experienced this. I was coming from New York City back to DC, and when we had the wires down on the tracks, right? So I thought the team did such a great job on X. They shared straight away, hey, and they went by train. They would actually say, okay, this is the status of this train. This is the status of like train 187, 107. They were going down the line and providing updates, and it was great to see the interaction in real time.
If you're logged onto our application, those same messages would go to you just for your train. And you can also sign up for those notifications. They'll come by text or email.
And I was getting those, so that's what happened. The same, I was seeing the text and that, yeah. It's great.
Thank you. We're working really hard on improving that too. We've spent
Anyone
a
else?
lot of time this year on that project.
You got another-
I couldn't tell you what states have, because one, what I didn't mention at the beginning was unemployment insurance in each state sits under different agency within the state. So some have their own Facebook X accounts, some don't.
So David, you got any comments on that?
The social media team, there is communication between the call centers and the social media team, but to my knowledge, there's no actual overlap between those two teams.
Okay.
I could say this could be an interesting topic just for the COI to take on. Nikki, your question is spot on. Maybe what are opportunities we can really lean in there? It sounds like there's different agencies are doing different things, and maybe an opportunity to share best practices around that. That's a really key point, because I think it seems like from the Omni-Channel journey, and as David shared, it's a journey, and so we've got to prioritize all of it. But eventually, when we want to integrate social as part of it, how does that look like? So that could be a really good follow-on combo.
Great. So Lee, I didn't see any other questions in the chat.
No other questions. See if anyone else, did I see any raised hands? No. What a great panel, and thank you, Jen, for an amazing moderation. So appreciate it.
I just want to thank each and every one of you for stepping up, and just great insights, and just I look forward to continuing the discussion with all of you. So unless there's any more questions, I think
there's a quick note for everyone. I mentioned it earlier in the call, but the CX Summit is on November 15th. So please, it's the ACT-IAC CX Summit. The CX COI is a key part involved in it, and Martha Doris is leading the effort with ACT-IAC. So please mark your calendars for November 15th. If you want to be involved with it, please reach out to Martha or myself or Nancy or Carol. Just reach out to anyone on the COI. We'd love to have you involved with it, with the planning, with anything that you'd like to participate. So it's gonna be a great event. Last year, I think over 850 that were there. I think this year it's gonna be pretty epic.
We love epic.
Thank you.
Anyway, if you're not looking at the chat, you panelists, you're getting great kudos. Again, I want to thank you for your time. And so everyone have a great day. And Lee, they said there'll be a recording if anyone wants to access it. I'm not certain where they can find it, but I'm going to let you handle that piece.
Yep, it'll be sent out to the distro. We'll coordinate internally.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a great summer.
Thanks so much.
And I hope your arm heals, Sylvie. Quickly.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.
You too.